Tēnā tātou I te whānau. Te mea tūtahi he mihi atu kia koe a meihana, te kaikarikia I tēnei ata, kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Kei te mihi hoki ki ngā iwi e toru, Ngāti toa, Te Ati Awa, me Ngāti Raukawa. Ki te hau kāinga te whānau o te wānanga o Raukawa, he mihi tino aroha kia koutou. Kia koutou ngā mātāwaka o ngā hauē whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ki ngā tangata takitaki o te ao, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ai, ko au he uri o Ngāi Tahu me Ngāti Huirapa, kei etahi atu no India tōku māma, no Gujarati ia, ko Jessica Hutchings tōku ingoa. Kia ora everybody, it's great to be here. I'm really honoured to have been invited to kōrero today. I feel like I've given this kōrero on numerous occasions, probably, and some of you have been in the audience before, so I've fished into my kitty to think about how we can keep stretching the continuum of mātauranga Māori to bring new insights and new analysis to kaupapa around kaitiakitanga, environmental management, marakai, in new ways and in new directions, so that we can keep growing our knowledge base. Okay, clicker thing. So I want today to talk about the Huirapa, which is a kaupapa Māori or an Indigenous model for producing a pure product, or you might need to think about it in organics for about 2 seconds and then just ditch that Pākehā framework for thinking about healthy kai and flick back into an Indigenous framework to think about it as Huirapa. As Meihana said, I wear lots of hats. I was kind of thinking, what shall I put at the bottom of what I do? I really wanted to put yoga teacher first. I've just come off an 8-day yoga teacher training course, and I love touching my toes. I love being on the mat. And when I think about this kaupapa of Huirapa and all of the things that I do, I live on a little farm, 12 acres. We grow heaps of food. We're producing our own meat. All of that for me, hands in the dirt, being on the front of my yoga mat in Tadasana or Samastedi, is all just about coming home to myself. So easy for me to make the connections. My mother always reminds me that I'm a Gemini and I can flit in between all these different spaces. Okay, so a little bit of an overview. I want to frame the conversation at the beginning around Māori food sovereignty. Within that conversation, I really want to impress on you this notion of diversity and freedom. And Vandana Shiva comes into my mind straight away. If I think of a writer, Indian writer, who talks about food sovereignty, seed sovereignty, the impact of global multinationals on our food system, our well-being and our cultural knowledges, I think of Vandana Shiva's work and what she talks about in terms of diversity and the need to actually keep growing diversity. At the moment in Aotearoa, there's been a high alert for red rust on Mānuka in the far north. So we're talking about a disease, let's call it a disease, that can come and attack a monocultured crop like Mānuka. Diversity, both in plant species and in cultural knowledges, is actually our best protection for these types of diseases. I will also too have a kōrero this morning around the development story of Huirapa and talk a little bit about the funding. We had some philanthropic funding from the J.R. Mackenzie Trust and the Todd Foundation when we were out of the research and development phase and into the implementation phase. So I'll talk a little bit about that and open my heart and be a little bit honest with you about where things are at now, because community work, unpaid, we're all passionate for the kaupapa, we love to get in the garden, but there's also a lot of admin that needs to happen, and the potential of a system not quite being realised because I think of not necessarily having funding or not necessarily having the same people on board for years and years. Before I start, I want to dedicate this presentation to Matua Percy Tepini, who was the chair of Te Waka Kai Ora and the founder from 2001. And unfortunately, Percy passed away last month, and it was a real shock for Aotearoa. And I'm looking out at the audience. I can see some Te Waka Kai Ora whānau in the audience and some Huirapa growers in there. So I dedicate this presentation to Percy, and although us in the Māori organics movement were in complete shock that he'd left us before we've even really finished our work, he's left us with a beautiful taonga and a wero at the same time to pick this up and to keep going without the most remarkable radiant light of leadership that he provided for us. So let's begin by talking about food sovereignty and the threats to food sovereignty. I want to start by talking about the circulation of global food circuits, and I'm actually going to read a paragraph or two, just 2 paragraphs, from my book, because I spent quite a long time labouring over those words, and I think it sums it up really nicely, better than me rabbiting on trying to pull something out of the top of my head. But what I've said is that it's due to global food circuits and international capital flows that we're eating food that has travelled thousands of miles from its production source. And when I talk about global food circuits, I'm referring to the pathways that food follows before arriving on our plates. Where's it been? These pathways are determined by political, social and economic dimensions of food production, such as global agribusiness, multinational forces, neoliberal ideologies, food producers, advertisers and marketers. They are also influenced by inputs such as seeds, fertilisers, pesticides, chemicals, water, transportation and distribution. So this notion of a global food circuit is highly complex with multiple players. Global food circuits are underscored by the liberalisation policies of the 20th and 21st centuries, which have seen what I would call the global south into a world farm for a minority of global consumers in the global north. And this mimics for me the extractive relationship set in place in the colonial era between Europe and the rest of the world, where colonies were converted into supply zones of food and raw materials in order to fuel European capitalism and imperialism. So I see these global food circuits and flows of capital as akin to the colonial paths that navigated by the early colonial settlers. They trample on our localised pathways, our knowledges and our food practices in order to produce food deemed culturally appropriate by the other, and in this case the other is the coloniser. These global food circuits do not make sense ecologically or culturally, and this is particularly true in Aotearoa, where our land is rich and our skills are wide in order to produce localised food-producing economies. However, to the large agribusiness boardrooms, the current situation makes bottom-line sense. Grow as much food per acre as possible using industrialised fertilisers and pesticides, and deliver food commodities via trade subsidies and free trade agreements. So you can go onto Google and you can have a look at food maps, global food circuits. And if you look at that, you can see that the top food companies and what they own. And not surprisingly, they're 7 or 8 companies who own and control most of the global food supply. They own almost everything. Pepsi Cola, General Milks, Kellogg's, Associated British Foods, Kraft Foods, Mars, Danone, Unilever, Coca-Cola and Nestle. And Nestle, I must say, have had real impacts in the continent of Africa in terms of producing and oversupplying formula milk. So really impacting on the relationship that mothers have with regards to breastfeeding their children. So these companies are impacting on our ability to stay within our natural bodies and with our natural connection to the landscape to produce food. So the other threat to food and health sovereignty is this, what Vandana Shiva talks about as a triple crisis. The convergence of climate change, and we heard Reece talk about climate change yesterday, but you put that convergence of climate change with peak oil. I know Donald Trump thinks he's going to go and find a whole lot more oil, but climate change, peak oil and food insecurity creates this notion of what's called a wicked problem. And a wicked problem is just a really complex problem that requires multiple collaborations to be able to deal with it. I think another threat is around have we got the technology for you to fix up food production? So, in the past 10, 15 years, we saw a ramp up in Aotearoa around conversations about GE-free. GE crops are going to feed the world. So the reliance on technological fix again, taking us away from our relationship as nature beings with the environment and our foodscapes to produce food for ourselves. The erosion of biodiversity in food-growing communities is a threat, and I've just put the garden shop syndrome down there. This idea that we think that we need to rely and still engage in capitalist economies and have to go and purchase things from garden shops in order to be food growers. So we're really locked in to the cycles of capitalism, and we have to do quite a lot of things on quite a lot of levels in order to break that, to become back to being food secure and food sovereign. I'm going to call us nature beings in ourselves. The artwork in this presentation is beautiful. It's done by Teresa Reihana, who's a whanaunga of Matua Uncle Percy's, and I've got her email address at the end if anybody's interested in purchasing any of her art. She did this piece of artwork in the early 2000s, and it was as a protest or as a commentary on the conversation in Aotearoa around GE. And I think this, for me, this sums a lot of it up. What's driving our food systems? The commodification of life. I'm not even going to explain that, it speaks for itself. If I think about Māori food sovereignty, and in the book I boldly had a go at defining what this was, I think it's the practice of ensuring food secure futures for whānau independent of multinational and national food systems and in harmony with the natural world. So if I just go back to thinking about the garden shop syndrome, when you go to the garden shop and you see Yates products and the organic range of Yates products on the shelf, Yates is actually owned by Monsanto. And Monsanto are is a company that participates in GE technologies and GE-based agriculture. So really cutting the ties, like visually seeing yourself cutting the ties in how we participate in the food system, to be independent, to be sovereign, to be self-determining, is something that I advocate for in food sovereignty. So that does mean cutting our ties with garden shops. It's about whānau having access to safe, nutritious, culturally appropriate food that's produced locally and free from chemicals, pesticides and genetic modification. And then I have this beautiful quote from Vandana Shiva. I actually met her at a food conference a couple of years ago and asked her bravely if she would write something to endorse the book. And she said yes. And so she wrote this, and it's on the back of the book, and she just wrote it like that. And I thought, that's somebody who's thinking about diversity, thinking about the relationship between seeds. But I love this. It's the idea of diversity and freedom wrapped up in a seed, rejuvenating culture and community, the connection between the soil and the seed. For me, Māori food sovereignty is about diversity and freedom. So te waka kai ora, this is us. Don't really need to explain what we are. This is us in Teresa's picture. We're a national rōpū or an organisation, a collective that has regional hubs, say, or regional whānau that connect up regionally in a very ad hoc way. So when I say that, I might have given you the impression that there's some overall coordination and you can go onto our website. We don't have one yet. We were established in 2001. We don't have one, so this is me being honest about where the kaupapa is at. Because the people in our community are actually growers. We're in the garden. If I had a choice to be in the garden or be in front of the computer, I'd go to the garden. So this is just an example of some of the Indigenous development challenges at the Flax Roots. We are the kaitiaki of Huirapa. And so we run the Huirapa system, and what that is that's a Māori, and I'll say it again last time, Māori organic verification system in New Zealand. For a country of close to 4.2, 4.3 million people, we have 4 organic verification systems. They're all Western based, they're all based on Western science. Not one of those organic verification systems provides a pathway for a kaupapa Māori or an Indigenous story of food production to be told, which I think is appalling. I think that that's just lay out colonisation and let's describe it in terms of foodscapes, and there you go. So we have the organic sector in New Zealand producing food for the worried well, the white and the wealthy, and not providing an opportunity for Māori communities to actually engage in that system. So when Te Waka Kai Ora was established in 2001, our Māori growers said, we want a system where we can tell our own kaupapa Māori, our own Indigenous story of agriculture. And so those of us with research experience, myself included, went, okay, let's apply for some research money. This sounds like a research and development project initially. We need to create a system. So we applied to what was then the Foundation for Research, Science and Technology, won a $600,000 research grant. We framed it up in the most neoliberal language we could pick up. And then we won it, and we were really surprised. We didn't deliver on any of the neoliberal things that we said we would do in the proposal. But what we did was we ran a 3-year research project to develop this, a kaupapa Māori verification and validation system for a pure product. And Matua Percy was always really clear not to call it like an organic certification system. He said nobody can certify the tikanga of our hapu and our whānau. So all it is it's just a verification and a validation system. What it does though, and we spent a bit of time doing this, is that it maps back against the New Zealand organic standard. So it gives our producers in New Zealand an opportunity to call themselves both Huirapa verified and organically verified. And that was quite an interesting, from a researcher point of view, an interesting exercise of mapping pūtaiao, Māori traditional knowledge, back against or overlaying it against a Western framework in the Pākehā organic standard. So this is the tohu that you'll see on a few products. So we haven't been that commercially successful as we promised the government we would be, but we've been really successful on a whānau level. So Kathy Tate Jamison, who lives probably an hour that way, is a beautiful dairy farmer with beautiful milking herds of cows. She produces yogurt that is already organically certified, but her product also too carries the Huirapa label. So you can go into supermarkets all around New Zealand and actually in Australia as well. You can pick up her yogurt, you know it's organic, but you also too know that she's brought kaupapa Māori thinking into her agricultural practices, and that's the beautiful thing. So what are the principles of Huirapa? We have 6 kaupapa. Our research question, one research question, he aha ngā kaupapa o te Huirapa. What constitutes a Huirapa or a pure product? That was our research question. We went all around the motu, we held hui for about 2 years, collected way too much kōrero, went back to the marae, had wānanga, and we're trying to think about how do you develop a system. Bless our kaumātua in the Te Waka Kai Ora whānau who bring light and simplicity to what we can turn into being very complex. They saw it just like that. So there's 6 kaupapa, and I'm going to take you through those now. So, and they're in no particular order, and we could have chosen any kaupapa. I think we might have had like about 80 to 100 kaupapa that came up, but we just chose 6. And like with all traditional knowledge frameworks, with our knowledge systems, it's all interconnected anyway. So it didn't really matter what 6 we chose. It's about people, our communities, being able to tell their stories into these kaupapa. So whakapapa is a kaupapa. It's a connection to the natural environment. What the bullet points are down the bottom is those are some ideas of how we've mapped it against the Western organic standard. So it's about knowing all the origins and the inputs of your product and passing down the knowledge of the whakapapa of your whenua and the food that's grown there. So in our forms, when people have to fill it out, we ask them to lay out the whakapapa of their whenua. Not all of our whānau, Te Waka Kai Ora whānau, are growing on family land. Some of them are growing on private land. But it's that idea that actually you begin to fracture the notion, disrupt, as Lance said last night, that you get to disrupt the automatic right just to get on a piece of whenua and to grow food. So that's whakapapa. Wairua. Wairua, there's a health and safety component in the New Zealand organic standard. So we mapped this, we mapped peace and safety to here. The idea of protecting and uplifting the state of mind of kaimahi to foster the production of vibrant and life-giving food, maintaining safe and healthy mahinga kai practices. So what this framework is it's a learning framework, it's a talking into framework. So although that's what Te Waka Kaiora have set out as here's some ideas for how you can think about it, when you go through the verification system, you get to put your own interpretation or apply or explain your own tikanga for how you make meaning of this kaupapa of wairua. The kaupapa of mana. Huaparakore is a vehicle for justice, so upholding te tiriti o Waitangi, encouraging kotahitanga in the whānau and hapu, exercising tino rangatiratanga through food and energy security. Māramatanga. I think of this as vibration, but it's been written as enlightenment, experiencing, perceiving and learning from the natural environment to guide your food production through the māramataka, through our calendar. The observation of seasonal patterns and rhythms of the skies, planets and stars, and recognising tohu, utilising food production as a place of learning. And this is where Percy would often talk about the notion of divine senses. And when I first started having the opportunity to spend time with him, I would hear him talk about divine senses for a long time, and I was like, yep, okay, yep, this is cool, yep. Didn't quite know what he was really meaning about divine senses. And I think now, for me as a Huaparakore food producer, this notion of divine senses becomes clearer and clearer the more I actually take my gumboots off and in the mara in my bare feet and can connect both into the earth but connect in with myself and how I'm feeling, how I'm re-engaging with myself as a food grower, and then being able to eat that food as well. So it might seem very notion of divine senses. For me, this is actually at the essence of this Huaparakore system. When I read out about what constitutes global circuits of capital and food production, there's nothing divine in any of that. There's nothing divine in the commodification of nature, the circulation of global capital, trade agreements, tariffs. There's nothing divine in any of that. But yet food had a divine place and a divine relationship with our communities. This notion of returning back to eating our cultural landscapes, eating the divinity of nature. We've lost our connection as nature beings. So this kaupapa of māramatanga, for me, just my interpretation at the moment, because my thoughts change, makes me connect with this notion that Percy laid in front of us of the divine senses. Te ao tūroa, Huaparakore maintains a natural order. So in any food production or organic system, a natural system, you're wanting to keep a natural order. You're not wanting to go and fracture that natural order. You want to grow in harmony with nature. So we talk about practicing kaitiakitanga, building soil diversity, fertility and health, diversity, respecting the boundaries or the relationships between tapu and noa, ensuring livestock and product are not contaminated with non-permitted inputs. We have all the non-permitted inputs that you would have in an organic system, and protecting the welfare of livestock. And then the tikanga of Māori, the principle of Māori, maintaining healthy soils, healthy plants and healthy people. So for me, I can walk over the farm and just get a sense in my being of where things are at. And that's a connecting in from divine sense of myself as a nature being to the divine sense that's going on or the relationship in my farm. I'm also to a biodynamic producer, and so on our farm we've been putting biodynamic preparations on there for probably 13 years now. So in a lot of ways we've created a vibration over very small, 12 acres, but when we were Huaparakore verified, I do remember Matua Percy standing up on the top paddock and saying, can you explain what this arc is? And my biodynamic head went, yep, I can explain what that arc is. That arc is the vibration and the connection between the cosmos and the earth. And it's the vibration that is holding that connection between the cosmos and the earth. So I think about that in terms of Māori. Ooh, whoops, okay. So those are our 6 kaupapa, and like I said, those kaupapa give you an opportunity to bring in any other kaupapa as well. What it does is it provides a framework to tell a huaparakore or a Māori story, an Indigenous story for food production. This framework was taken to Hawaii by Te Waka Kaiora maybe about 3 or 4 years ago and shared with Hawaiian communities who were really interested in becoming huaparakore verified, but with their own tikanga, with their own cultural practices framing that up. So this is what our whāraki is. This is about producing safe food through Māori food communities. Sustainable land management practices, zero tolerance to GMOs, nano and synbio and every other non-kind of natural thing that can be put into the land. Pesticide and chemical free, building food resilient Māori communities. Like, what does that really mean? That really, for me, means cutting those ties between the multinational system, the garden shop, in terms of being food producers. Exercising tikanga Māori, and as I said, we're a korowai to the New Zealand Organic Standard. It takes 3 years to become huaparakore verified, just as it does to be verified an organic producer in a Western system, and that's because it takes 3 years to transition a piece of land from having had pesticides and chemicals, and I'm not talking about heavy metals in the soil, that's a whole nother thing, but it takes 3 years to, and I'm not even going to say completely heal, but to be far enough on that healing journey to return a piece of land back to a state where it can start to radiate its own vibration. Before I was huaparakore verified, I was Organic Farm New Zealand verified on the farm, and they're completely 2 different systems. For the verification system, for the Pākehā certification, the Western certification, I'd have an auditor turn up once a year. He'd roll up in his ute, he'd pull out a spade, we'd walk around, he wouldn't be too busy, couldn't have a cup of tea, made scones, couldn't eat my wholemeal scones, all of that. We'd go for a walk around the farm, he'd do a spade dig in a few paddocks, we'd do a few worm counts, we'd have a conversation. I can't even remember anything we'd really talk about. He'd check in my shed to check that I haven't got Roundup or any chemicals. He'd look at my 50-page document that I'd filled out, and then he'd be gone because he had about 4 other verifications to do that day. So there was nothing relational in that process for me. A different verifier came back every year. I would get a typed up certificate from Organic Farm New Zealand, and it cost me $480 a year. When I became huaparakore verified, and I'll go through this in a minute, but in the 3rd year, for the 3rd year full verification, you have a hui arohi, so you have a community hui, and it's the community who verifies you as being huaparakore verified. So on my certificate for huaparakore, I think there might have been 60 to 80 people at the farm, and we had a big hui, and we walked around and we talked about the kaupapa, those 6 kaupapa. I was asked questions to explain how I enact those kaupapa on the farm. And my certificate is awesome. It's made of harakeke, there were heaps of tamariki at the hui, and they've written their names all over it, drawn little pictures, and everybody's signed it everywhere. So it's a participatory, guaranteed kind of system, very different from what the Western organic system is, and it's much more meaningful for me. So this is year 1. This is the verification and validation process. So really, I suppose this image here is the start, as you can see in the middle, it's the start of the awakening in the south to think, I might want to go down this pathway, wonder what this is like. Maybe today a seed's dropped for you, and it's like, maybe I might want to investigate this a little bit more. In year 1, it's about self-verification. So, whakapu moa whānau, self-verification. You have conversation with your whānau that this is what you're wanting to do. You receive some resources from Te Waka Kaiora to support you into the system. And you affirm the tikanga that you use in food production. And you begin to connect in with the self in terms of your observation skills. So, as someone who's grown food for a decade now, and with biodynamics, nothing is more useful to me than my own senses and what I know about something. I saw an ad on telly last night for Fonterra, and they'd overlaid this graphic over the paddock with 20% moisture content, 18%. They went to a cow with a tag on its ear and had all these, kind of outputs for the cow, and I thought, where is the divine senses between the farmer and what the farmer is producing? So step 2 is whakapu maua rohi. So this is the rohi verification. So this is when somebody else in your rohi will come, or your area, will come and be with you on your farm. And actually it was Pātaka who came and visited me on my farm. And we have a conversation about what's going on. So that's the first time that you've brought somebody external from Te Waka Kaiora in to give, like, I suppose, a third-party verification. And just quickly, when Pātaka came to the farm, we just built a house, and the plumbers put the sewage line in a place that I didn't really want it to go. So what it did was it fractured the potential area for growing food. So Pātaka and I had a conversation about how far should the mata be away from that, we don't want to grow food over it, that type of stuff. And that was really helpful for me. And recently we've put up a tunnel house because I'm over rabbits and pukeko eating my kai and possums. And we had to make the same decision, where should we put the tunnel house, limited space up by the house. And I recall back that conversation with Pātaka, right, there's the sewage line. We're not having food production, on either side of it for this many metres. The third step, whakapu maua hua parakori, this is when the kaitiaki rōpū from the Māori Organics group comes and you invite your community and your whānau and you go through a whole process. You have a wānanga and you really feel like I'll say me, I really felt like I was given permission to carry the kaupapa of hua parakori and that I was being asked to do that with integrity. So I think that's really different from my experience with the Pākehā Organic Verifier, because if anything, I just felt like I wanted to do something really bad just to piss them off. But this one, I felt like actually I want to uphold the integrity of this Indigenous system. So kaupapa Māori verification for food and food production. And these are some of our beautiful whānau from Te Waka Kaiora. People might recognise these faces. Geneva and Ray from the far north. They were our first hua parakore whānau to be verified. They're no longer on this piece of whenua, but can't see in the photo, but there's lots of whānau around there with them. Kaiwaka and Lynn from Whaingaroa, from Raglan, and they're doing amazing things and growing beautiful food. They're leasing Māori land on a beautiful piece of whenua that overlooks the ocean in Whaingaroa. And last time I was having a conversation with Kaiwaka, he was really, he was communicating with me that the iwi had ideas about building motel units on this piece of land for development purposes, and he was really disappointed that the potential of food growing and they're bringing people from community in there could have been usurped because there was greater economic potential to put motel units on this piece of land. And then this is Auntie's Garden, Waipatu Marae in the Hawke's Bay, and just on the other side of where that white car is the wharekai, is the kitchen, and then the wharenui, the meeting house. And these gardens are amazing. These called Auntie's Garden because a different auntie is responsible for every plot. I think first rule in farming and community gardening, you have to share the jobs out as much as you can. But this is inspiring. I wish there was a photo of the wharenui right beside it, so you can see the potential of food growing and being able to feed our communities from the gardens next to our meeting places. So just before I move on to the next slide, I want to talk about, I just want to park the hua parakore system for a minute. So that's my kōrero around, this is what we developed. We had that 600,000 to build the system. We had philanthropic money to strengthen our governance, to get financial management systems in place. And that was incredibly helpful at the time. But it wasn't a long enough time frame, that's what I'd say about that. We needed a much longer time frame to really make that happen. paying consultants, which is what we did, that was the way that we spent the money, to come in and give us financial advice and look at the system and say, in year one, it's $50 to join up. You need this many people in year one in order to make it sustainable. Then from year one, you need this many over into year two. It's $75 in year two. Year three, you need to carry this many forward, and then this could be your projected income stream. I really understood that on paper, but it hasn't worked out in terms of being able to implement that for the organisation. So that's where we're at in our development pathway now. We launched the system in 2011, so that's 6 years ago. And the next phase for Te Waka Kaiora would be to pick up that work that was funded by philanthropic money to try and build a sustainable organisation. And when I say that, I mean in terms of funding and people to actually do the work. And as a bonus, a website would be really good. So the Huirapa kore, what I want to say before the next slide is an Indigenous framework. That's all it is. It's an Indigenous framework. And it's Indigenous framework that can be applied in a whole lot of other places as well. When I was talking to Caleb last night about it, he was telling me that they're using the Huirapa kore framework as a assessment of environmental effects for them at a local council level. So they're just taking these kaupapa and using it as an environmental effects framework. So really, I suppose what I'm saying here is, how many frameworks do we need to develop? Can we not work with what we've already got? And so I just couldn't help myself, and I'm not apologising. So I've taken the Huirapa kore framework into my yoga teaching and into my own self-practice as a yoga student. And you might recognise part of the image in the Yoga Ha postcard here. But for me, when I think about myself as a nature being and my place of home on the yoga mat, I really felt that vibration within myself. And so all I'm doing, and it's a work in progress in my head thinking about it, is how do I apply these kaupapa onto the yoga mat, so when I'm teaching Māori communities, with Māori communities, I can make water practice relevant in a way that supports our communities to come back to feel the vibration of a nature being that for me then is also connected to our vibration as food growers. So I hope you followed all those links, because I really get it. So if I reflect on the Huirapa kore system, and just winding up here, I think about, the need to build a sustainable funding stream, and I've talked about this. That's the next step. And that's a big challenge for us with Matua Pusi having passed. At the moment, there is nobody fulfilling any roles. When he passed, everything just, we've just decided to put roles to the side, and we're going to gather together for an AGM and reset as a rōpū. Keeping people interested with the required skills engaged in the work, and I liked Miriana's whakaaro of the notion of work-ons. So we've lost a few work-ons along the way. People got really burnt out and have dropped off and come back on, and dropped off and come back on, and dropped off and not come back on, but this is important. The fluid nature of community work, short-term memory, not leaving behind the gains of funded work. So with people dropping off, they have no... they weren't around at the research and development phase and the $600,000 investment into the research project. And as a researcher, I take really seriously a $600,000 research investment to make sure that its potential is realised. Succession planning, realising the potential of a system, and this idea of reimagining modern-day Indigenous food stories. So again, I'm picking up on what Miriana was saying yesterday. This idea of reimagining Otaki as a Māori-speaking community. So let's reimagine the modern-day Indigenous food stories. And then let's put that reimagining into practice through our own vibration and start it. So key messages. This word of fracture, disrupt, this passive receivers. This was from the beautiful presentation yesterday about the climate change hui into whānau Apanui next year. So we need to fracture being passive receivers of these wicked problems. And this is really, if I flip that around, it's about enacting self-determination. Looking for Indigenous solution frameworks and creativity. it's a creative act to take the Huirapa framework and apply it out in a whole lot of different directions. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of Indigenous frameworks in your communities where you can do the same. And then native to native networking. So collaborations as momentums of change. I heard that right yesterday, but this was the kōrero again from the people who spoke about the climate change hui into whānau apanui. Collaborations as momentums of change. We don't need to work by ourselves. We're much better holding hands and working together. And in order to combat a wicked problem, I understand from reading the literature as a recovering academic, is that we have to be able to work together to do that. It's not one person, it's multiple knowledges and multiple skill sets that will create this change. So, my final point is around Indigenous food sovereignty. And my last comment is that we need to return to eat our cultural landscapes through what Percy would describe as being all of our divine senses. And for me, this is decolonisation. And Shirley Simmons last night talked to me about the notion of micro-decolonisations. We don't need to fix the whole system, but we need to be able to engage in something at least once or twice a day that's a micro-active decolonisation. So the practice of coming home for me in the mara, in the garden, or on the farm, or the practice of coming home at the front of the yoga mat is a micro-practice of decolonisation. So I have 18 and a half minutes left. And in the last 10 minutes, I want to do a little exercise with you all. I've never done this before, so be kind to me. So I want to invite you to join me in a meditation for maybe 8 to 10 minutes. We'll see how we go. To come home to yourself and to connect in with your divine senses. So in order to begin this meditation, I just ask you to clear your, just maybe put the laptops down, turn the phones off, and make sure you've got a bit of space. You might need to turn your chair around. And I just want you to begin by putting your 4 feet, actually lifting the feet and then putting them back onto the ground. And the knees are hip distance apart. And feel the feet through the socks, it's a cold day, and the boots and the shoes, through the carpet, through the concrete and into the earth. You might need to come forward a little bit on the chair so the pelvis tips forward a little bit. And you can elongate up through the spine. Roll the shoulders up to the ears and take them back to the shoulders and just let them hang off the back of the shoulder blades. Lengthen up through the base of the spine all the way up through the crown of the head. And then slightly drop the chin. Close the eyes. Connect in with the body. Drop quickly into the self. Connect with the breath moving through the body. Give yourself some time to follow the inhale breath, and then some time to follow the exhale breath. And just follow the sound of my voice. You don't need to move your body at all, but follow the sound of my voice as we rotate the consciousness through the body. So bring your awareness to your feet, ankles, up your calves of both legs, to the knees, to the thighs, front and back. Back of thighs rest on seat. Up to the hips, to the belly, soft and relaxed. To the chest, through the collarbones, out to the shoulders on both sides, down both arms to the elbows, the wrists, and the hands. Taking the awareness up to the neck, to the chin, bottom lip, top lip, nose, eyes, eyebrows, forehead, front of face, back of head. Feel your body heavy on the seat and soft on the seat. Letting go of the physical body, explore your connection to the natural environment and feel it in your body. Invite the kaupapa of whakapapa to your divine senses. Honour the sacredness within yourself as a light being connected to Rangi Nui, sky deity, and Papa Tuanuku as earth deity. Invite the kaupapa of to your divine senses. Visualise yourself standing in your own self-determining right, connected to your own cultural foodscapes. Invite the kaupapa of mana to your divine senses. Feel the resonance, the vibration of healthy soil between your hands. Imagine holding it, smelling it, rubbing it between your fingers. Invite the kaupapa of Mauri to your divine senses. Open your awareness to insight and enlightenment that comes from being connected to your local foodscapes. Invite the kaupapa of Māramatanga to your divine senses. Now return to the essence of yourself as a nature being and invite the kaupapa of Te Aotearoa to your divine senses. Now gather all these divine senses. Visualize them as light and see the light vibrate inside you, inside the whole body. The whole body, the whole body. Bring your awareness slowly back to your physical body. And maybe begin by moving your fingers and your toes inside your shoes. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Namaste, the light in my heart honours the light in you.